All right, it is time to bring in the panel with all the best insights in town. Team Rising and tonight's special debate edition includes Senior Director of Policy for the Conservative Partnership Institute, Rachel Bovard. Also journalist and great friend of the show, Zed Jelani. Maximilian Alvarez is a writer and host of the Working People podcast, and Democratic strategist Andrew Feldman. Welcome, guys.
All-star
Always
panel.
Appreciate
Absolutely.
you guys
Great to be
coming
here.
in. I want to start, Zed, with you on that moment we just played, Biden on Afghanistan. So this was a blockbuster report that the Washington Post had that did not get nearly the attention that it deserved. So I was very glad that the moderators brought it up here. Basically, it said that over multiple administrations, the American people have been lied to about the progress in Afghanistan. She tried to press him to get him to respond to what he knew and when, and he managed to slide out of that without ever really responding to the question. What did you make of that moment, though?
Look, I do think Joe Biden, when he was vice president, it was known in D.C. that he was critical of the troop surge that Obama went ahead with.
Yeah.
I think he's right about that. But the question is, Obama and Biden, Biden acts like Obama and him are best friends all the time, so he doesn't want to criticize him. But the reality is that Obama intentionally misled the people about the Afghanistan war. I know this because I worked at a think tank in D.C. where top officials like Dennis McDonough and Ben Rhodes were going after me and trying to silence me because we were critical of their stance on the Afghanistan war. So I know that Obama was an enforcer on this. I know that he kept the war going. It's kind of an open secret. But unfortunately, I don't think Biden feels like he can owe up to that fact because he wants to win over all these voters by saying he's the best friends. He was the vice president. Look at my selfies with Obama. So
that was the exact takeaway I had, Zed, which was I was like, you know what? I also read a lot about the Afghan war at the time. I know Biden was against a lot of these decisions, but he was like, well, the Pentagon was against me. Bob Gates was against me. Yeah, and you're basically throwing, Rachel, he basically threw President Obama under the bus without actually trying to say, I completely disagreed with President Obama. It really just pokes a hole in the balloon, really, of this whole Obama love that he's tried to wrap himself in.
Yeah, and I think it could have been a very big moment for him to distinguish himself, especially after all of this reporting, especially the new polling showing how many people are against these wars. But I really am glad it came up because we just saw Republicans and Democrats in Congress pass a $1.4 trillion spending bill that fully funds this war.
That's right.
Not even talking about the reporting from the Washington Post. At one time, this would have conjured breathless hearings, some accountability, but I'm glad it came up tonight.
That's a really good point.
Indeed.
Well, speaking of Joe Biden, we also had, this was a pretty explosive moment. Both Crystal and I, it caught our eyes. When Joe Biden was specifically asked by moderator Tim Alberta, he was asked, will you sacrifice blue-collar jobs in favor of green regulation? He had a stunning answer. Let's take a listen, and we're going to get the whole panel's response.
Lately, Vice President Biden, I'd like to ask you, 3 consecutive American presidents have enjoyed stints of explosive economic growth due to a boom in oil and natural gas production. As president, would you be willing to sacrifice some of that growth, even knowing potentially that it could displace thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of blue-collar workers in the interest of transitioning to that greener economy?
The answer is yes.
Oh, pretty devastating answer there, I think, Max, from Joe Biden. I think that was on the par with Hillary Clinton saying that she wanted to, she wanted to have
coal miners
out of work. I mean, that is something you heard over and over again on the campaign trail. What did you make of that response? And I think I would like you to also bring up how Bernie Sanders answered that question in a totally different manner.
Yeah, I mean, I think this really does speak to, one of the major problems that the Democratic Party has had with working people for a very long time, right? At the hands of people like Joe Biden, where they take working people for granted. They assume that things are just going to work out through the magic of globalization and economic progress and so on and so forth. People hear that, they're going to be scared. They're going to be angry. And obviously, we're going to have to substantively transition, like our economy into something that is less like planet killing and horrifying than it is right now. But just the way of talking about it, that Joe Biden has, I think just, concretizes everyone's sense that the Democratic establishment doesn't take working people seriously, doesn't take their struggles and their lives as seriously as the rest of us do. And I mean, I also think that the ways that workers and worker issues were hardly brought up in this debate actually kind of make that point as well. And first, and this is wild because this debate almost didn't happen because of a worker strike.
That didn't even come up.
That's right. And I want to give a shout out to Unite Here Local 11 on their new contract, their new wage increases. And this is not a special interest issue. Like, this is one of the most fundamental issues because, as people like Stephen Greenhouse have said, unions are good for democracy, right? Worker power is good for democracy,
Yeah.
right? You know, if you have decline in union membership, inequality goes up, right? That is just a basic fact.
Right.
And we're not talking about the plight of working people in these sort of substantive terms. We're really only bringing them up when they matter in certain swing states, and
Right.
even then, candidates like Joe Biden are absolutely
as
dropping
like
the
a
ball.
demographic to pander to,
Right.
rather than a central thing we should be talking about.
Andrew,
I mean, Andrew, on the issue with Biden, look, I'm not saying that this moment is going to hurt him in the primary. I think he overall had a good night. I don't think it's going to shake up the polls much. I think actually overall he had probably the strongest debate that he's had so far. However, I will tell you, having lived in Kentucky, having worked in West Virginia, I heard that line about Hillary Clinton putting the coal miners out of business repeated back to me so many times. And you can bet if Joe Biden is the Democratic nominee, that will be in Trump ads, and every working person in this country is going to know that he said that.
Joe Biden was pivoting on answers all night, right? He was. If you look at how many times he gets asked a question and doesn't answer the question, it was happening all night. And that's, to be honest with you, I think what if you should do as a candidate. You want to say what you want to say, not what the moderators want to hear.
Yeah.
Right.
However, he didn't do that with that question.
Right.
He
just said yes.
away. There was a whole different direction he could have gone in. He understands. He does have experience with working people. Guess what? Some of these building trades unions are very much behind him. So it was surprising to me that he did not pivot and talk about his experience in Scranton, his experience in Delaware and other places, because you know what? The reality is everyone knows that we have to do something when we have when we transition jobs. We have to make sure that we don't leave people behind.
Right.
And you've heard Joe Biden talk about that before. Obviously, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren talk about it, but to just whiff and not pivot at that answer was
so
really
ironic.
surprising.
Bernie answered that question saying, I don't agree with the premise of the question.
Your question's off the mark, I think is what he said. And it is funny because they all act like AOC is the one who's going to terrify everyone on climate change. But actually the Green New Deal, the way she talks about it, they lead with the just transition. They lead with we are not going to leave working people behind as we move to a green economy. Apparently Joe Biden didn't get the
could have
memo.
done just that.
Yeah, it's not hard to do.
Rachel, I mean, my phone lit up not even 2 minutes later from the RNC saying Joe Biden admits he will kill jobs if he becomes president. I mean, it's a gift. And I tweeted that at the time. I said, this is the greatest gift to the Trump campaign ad and the RNC in the swing states that you could ever ask for, right?
No, I think that's right. And again, this is Joe Biden. This is the Joe Biden that you like, right?
Yeah.
He's actually quite genuine in this regard. So
that's
exactly what he thought.
Crystal always says he's genuine in his terrible beliefs.
Yeah. I mean, I do. I believe that he honestly holds these bad, wrong ideas. For
no
decades
filter
at a
between
time.
the brain and the mouth.
What did you make of that, Zed? Are we making too big of a mountain out of the mole, or was it as devastating as we think it was?
Look, the reality is that there are two different kind of elections going on at the same time. There's a primary election where they're trying to win a certain set of voters, and there's a general election. And something like a general election, a statement like that is toxic. The RNC is going to cut that into a video and play it all over America, which, by the way, they will also do with Mayor Pete Buttigieg's, I think, answer on reparations, where he suggested that he would, deliver economic aid based on ancestry rather than socioeconomic status, which I think is a bullet that Bernie has dodged despite being pushed by some left activists on him, because I think he has a clear eye about how to heal divides in America, which is you heal everyone is hurting, not just a subset that is being advocated for at one point. So I think these moments keep popping up, and we're not going to see the damage now, but we may end up seeing them in an October or September kind of 30-second ad barrage.
Zed, I wanted to ask you, there's this kind of funny moment, but I actually kind of liked it from Bernie Sanders, where he was talking about universality on college. And he said, one crisis in America is that people are sick of filling out forms. And it's funny because, it's funny, it wasn't where I was expecting him to go, but also it's very real. And actually, a lot of people can totally connect with that.
Yeah.
I think, and that gets back to the idea of, are you going to means test benefits or programs by income? Going to do it by ancestry? Going to find out which group you put on the most oppressed list on your calendar, whatever you're doing? Or are you going to create simple, universal programs that everyone can take advantage of? No one's out, everyone's in, and nobody can complain that, hey, this group's getting their special privileges, their special advantages. It's not for me.
That was part of the conversation was one of, I think, several rough moments for Mayor Pete.
Yeah.
Right? Him trying to explain his cap on college affordability, to me makes no sense, because guess what? These rich people that he wants to pay for their own tuition, they're going to be doing it anyways because they're not sending their kids to public school. They don't send their kid to public school from K to 12 right now. So the reality is, to cap it at $150,000 a year for any sort of benefit, well, guess what? $150,000 right now isn't enough to support kids going to college.
That's 2 school teachers, a family of school teachers in New York City. That seriously is what that is.
Yeah.
You're capping 1 out of 5 Americans. Let's remember this. I mean, this is a fact. Democratic primary voters tend to be richer on average. So maybe you're talking about 30 or 40% Democratic.
Especially his supporters.
Especially Pete Buttigieg's supporters. Maybe 30 or 40% of them won't get to take advantage of free college under his own plan.
That's a great point.
Speaking of rich people and Mayor Pete, he took a lot of heat. That rhymed unintentionally.
Oh, yeah.
Poet and don't know it. He took a lot of heat over money in politics. I thought his sparring with Elizabeth Warren was more or less a draw, because he made a good point about, hey, you were taking this big money too, right up until the point that you ran for president. It's kind of hard to dispute. I thought Bernie Sanders had a very effective blow that he landed on both Biden and Pete. I actually loved this moment where he's like, you all and your billionaires, Pete, what are you going to do to catch up? That was amazing.
He's an energetic young man.
An energetic young man. So
brutal.
Competition. So condescending. But hold on, I'm getting somewhere with this. But there was another moment, another candidate. I wasn't really expecting to take this shot at Pete, but Andrew Yang also jumped in the fray. Let's take a listen.
I just want to return to this conversation because I think it's core. Our country is deeply misogynist, and most all of us know that. Money and men are tied together. That's where I thought Elizabeth was taking the conversation. The fact is, strong societies would elect more female leaders. Strong men treat women well for the same reasons. I'm on the record saying that you need both strong men and female leaders in government, because the fact is, if you get too many men alone and leave us alone for a while, we kind of become morons. So it's related to our campaign finance rules, because right now the fact is we operate in a fundamentally anti-woman marketplace, and that includes the marketplace for politicians. If we were to put 100 democracy dollars into the hands of every American voter, instead of 5% contributing, you'd see that rate skyrocket to 50 or 60%, and you'd have many, many more women who would run for office because they don't have to go shake the money tree in the wine cave.
Great.
Sounds so subversive.
Moment. Yeah, well,
Brutal.
Max, there's something so visceral about the wine cave that really captures your mind. And the way it was described with the crystals and the chandeliers and all of that, it's really captured the nation's imagination.
It has, and I think for good reason. Yeah, I mean, like, I have not been in such a wine cave, but I hear it's nice.
I didn't even know it exists.
Right. And, I think that, the sparring between Warren and Buttigieg was very interesting. It was probably the most compelling part of this entire debate for me. And I think I want to really, drive home the point that Buttigieg is incredibly well practiced at parrying these sorts of challenges, but if you listen carefully, he does not respond at all to the central challenge that Elizabeth Warren offered, which is that if you are on the high end of the donor class, your material and political interests are fundamentally different from the person who is working two low-wage jobs, right? And Buttigieg says, I don't want to discount anyone from getting involved in my campaign. That sounds nice. It is very good and well practiced. It is a right-wing talking point. This is exactly the same thing when, I grew up listening to Bill O'Reilly tell me that, just wealthy people were just expressing their free speech by donating a whole lot of money to these campaigns. They are living in a fantasy world, or they are trying to project onto you some sort of fantasy world in which people from different classes have and will fight for and will dump their money into preserving their interests. And this connects to the question of gender, right? I mean, there's a great adage, in the decolonization circles, which is don't diversify, decolonize. And if you are just kind of circulating, women and people of color into kind of the existing hierarchy that has put so many of us in economic precarity, that has left so many of us wanting, in our daily lives, you're not going to get anything. Like, I mean, what is it like a boss woman like thing that like the head of the CIA, or not the CIA, but Gina Haspel is like running a vicious and like
we've said that here before.
Right.
Slay queen, I guess.
Slay
queen. Literally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
like, what is that going to do? And it essentializes it assumes that like women are just
remember,
like inbuilt.
Whatever leader you elect, that's one person, right? There's 150 million women in this country. What is the reality for those 150 million women going to be under these different candidates, right? If a President Amy Klobuchar is there and she doesn't support, for instance, free college, she doesn't support universal free healthcare for people, what is the status of those 150 million women going to be just because one woman happens to have subsidized healthcare sitting in the White House?
Hold on, I do want to, because I just realized we didn't talk about Amy Klobuchar very much, and I do think she had a good moment we talked about earlier with Pete, where she really challenged him on his experience. He had one of those cute comebacks of, well, I got elected in Indiana's, Mike Pence's Indiana, and she smacked him with, you also lost by 20 points when you were running statewide.
25
by the way.
points, actually.
Get him, Amy.
Oh, we have that. So let's actually play a little bit of that.
Yes, longer coattails, that matters.
Thank you, Senator. Denise?
I got to respond to that. Senator, I know that if you just go by vote totals, maybe what goes on in my city seems small to you. If you want to talk about the capacity to win, try putting together a coalition to bring you back to office with 80% of the vote as a gay dude in Mike Pence's Indiana.
Again, I would, Mayor, if you had won in Indiana, that would be one thing. You tried and you lost by 20 points.
And the amazing thing was watching his face.
He really thought he had it.
The level of smug satisfaction was at 11. But Andrew, I want to ask you, my establishment-connected friend.
Yes.
Through your eyes, said with love, always. Through your eyes, how did you think that Amy did? Because I have a hard time judging these objectively. I actually thought she had probably her strongest night. I can imagine the other networks are saying, Amy's the one, Amy's electable, Amy's amazing. But what did you think?
Look, I think that Amy, just reminding voters and viewers, she raised $1 million in the last 24 hours of the last debate. I guarantee you she's going to double or triple that tonight in the next 24 hours. I thought she had a really good debate. I'm not an Amy Klobuchar supporter, but I thought she had a really good debate in giving those people that say they're not 50, they're 50%, there's a shot they may change their vote, to give her a look, and I think she's going to raise a lot of money off it. But before I give up the mic here, I just want to add one thing in about Buttigieg and the points that Max was making. I don't think Buttigieg got the point of that conversation with Elizabeth Warren. To me, the point is about access, because guess what? Elizabeth Warren has donors who are Republicans and independents, and so does Bernie Sanders, as well as Democrats, vast coalitions. But they're not buying access to these politicians. They're getting selfies for free. And I think Buttigieg is missing that point.
Well, he's deliberately missing that point. It's not that he's not smart enough to understand it. He just doesn't want to address it.
Exactly. All right, so right before we go, I want to get quick winners, losers, and predictions, so everybody have them ready. Max, what did you think? Your biggest winner from tonight, biggest loser, and a macro prediction for the state of the race.
Does it change? Yeah. Does it change anything?
I mean, I sadly think that Biden did quite well. And I think that it depends on how things shake out, whether or not that's going to be a win or a loss for us. But I guess I really just want to drive home kind of the point that I make every time I come on here, right, is that, look at who Biden is, right? He may have gotten the question right when Bernie challenged him and said, you just want to return to normalcy. Biden said normal's not good enough. But what else is he promising, right? We have him on tape telling Wall Street that everything's going to be fine, nothing's going to fundamentally change. We have Buttigieg saying that I'm going to bring people together when he has 3 black people and one Latino who actually support him. Right? And so I guess I think the losers would be us if we just take these sorts of
evergreen comments.
Right, right. Working people are losing. We are losing if we take these sorts of singular performances as the totality of candidates who in our hearts we know who they are.
So true.
We have seen who they are.
So true.
And I think that for people to really really kind of make this election what it needs to be, they need to recognize that. They need to know what's in their hearts, and they need to band together and not put all their faith on one party establishment candidate. And the only person who's really telling people that he's going to need all of us to really put pressure on this system is Bernie Sanders, and I think that he still holds strong there.
Well, so what do you think, Rachel? What do you think?
So two things that struck me. I do think Amy Klobuchar had a breakout night.
Yep.
And I also think Pete Buttigieg just comes across as so angry.
Yeah,
he's like home right now, seething in his wine cave.
Yeah.
But two things that really struck me, speaking of sort of the working class issue, two things Andrew Yang said that I really think brought it home. And the first was his response to impeachment, right? It was like, okay, so let's stop obsessing and realize why Trump won is because Democrats lost the working class. So I thought that was really prescient.
It was excellent.
But the second thing he said that I'm not sure anyone caught, really didn't get much attention, was he said we need to stop equating economic value with human value. And I think that really crystallizes, I think, the tension that's going on right now on the right and the left about how we move forward, with our sort of economic policies. And so I was kind of hoping that would get a little bit more attention because I really think that's the crux of the issue for a lot of people.
He
Excellently
he did such a good job on that, and it's so funny. I mean, consistently the only guy he talks about life expectancy, about economic value, human value, and
addiction.
I mean the addiction, just the way that he's able to put that all together is really just phenomenal. And you're right, it deserves a real call out here.
Well,
Go ahead.
I just want to make like one point on that, right? Is that again, trust your gut on this, because just look at the ways that we talk about something like immigration, and that entire argument is thrown out the window, right? The humanity of people coming to this country is made entirely dependent on their ability to work their butts off, like Biden says. There is no baseline consideration for the true human value of everyone in this country, and we know it. So again, I think Yang did make a great point. I would like to see him and others apply it across the board. Not just make people's humanity dependent on where they were born, not just make their humanity dependent on how hard they can work, right? People have value just by being here on this earth.
And in some ways, that's the fundamental divide in this primary, is the candidates who believe that and support that and the candidates who don't. Zed, let's hear from you. What do you think? Do you think anything changes out of this? And who did you think stood out tonight?
I think the smaller debate format helped folks like Andrew Yang make his case, I think, very eloquently in many directions. To me, the standout moment of the debate was actually between Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg, because I think she's the only person sitting on that stage who exposed his actual Achilles heel and his actual weakness. I don't think he has too many ideological weaknesses because his base in Iowa tends to be more conservative, tends to be a little bit more of the older wing of the Democratic Party. But I think she raised a really good point, which is questioning his electability.
Yes.
We don't know that a mayor who's only been elected in a hegemonic Democratic small city in Indiana
That was Mike Pence's Indiana.
Mike Pence's Indiana.
Apparently, the governor owns every city. He has control over it. But no, we don't know that somebody in that position can withstand $1 billion of Republican Party attack ads, can go toe to toe with Donald Trump. That is a real question. I think Amy Klobuchar exposed that in this debate, and I feel like that line of attack will decide whether or not Pete Buttigieg kind of gets out of these early Iowa caucuses, New Hampshire primaries. And I think she also stressed experience in a way that somebody like Bernie Sanders could be doing, given the fact that he has actually passed quite a few things. It's kind of funny to me that Amy Klobuchar raised the fact that Bernie Sanders is responsible for reforming the VA system, but he doesn't bring that up in his debates.
Yeah, and prescription drug pricing. She talked about working with him on that too.
Exactly. So I think that the kind of arguments that she brought up, if they were weaponized by someone like a Bernie Sanders, I think Bernie Sanders would win the race, because I think that's his big weakness right now. Is there's still a group of people out there who say, can a socialist really win the presidency of the United States of America? Is he just way far out there? I really like what he says. He has the highest favorability of any Democratic candidate in the most recent national polls, but can he really win? And I think once he stresses that and gets through that hurdle that Amy Klobuchar threw out for Buttigieg, I think he has a pretty good shot at winning this thing.
And it's not just, and these two things are connected, not just can you win, but can you govern?
Right.
And that's a question I hear a lot about him. And I think he could speak to his time as mayor, when he actually, he was mayor too, and he governed very effectively.
Another
and the
very good standout moment is, I don't know who Obama was talking to, probably a bunch of rich women or something, when he said, we need more women in charge of the world. By the way, studies have shown that queens were more militaristic than kings were. So I don't know. But when he answered that question so eloquently, I thought he really cut to the heart of the matter, which is he's talking about representing every person in America, not putting someone in America who one portion of the population can relate to through optics or through some kind of cultural affects. He's talking about representing every single person in America, which is a radical thing in today's Democratic Party, which I think is going through this Lebanon-style process where we're all these different segments and interest groups when really there's so much in common there. But it requires having a unified backing to be able to fight for things like universal health care, education, child care, decent teacher wages, ending wars, and defeating climate change and having humane immigration reform. You can only do those things by convincing people they have united interests, united values, and that they don't have to hate each other and fight each other over black, white, woman, gay, straight, man, woman.
Old, young, region of the country, from South Bend and not. I mean, and there was a lot of an attempt to focus from these moderators on identity, and so it stood out that he was able to make that case in the face of that. Andrew, what about you? Who stood out, and does anything change?
I'm not sure too much changes, because the reality is I'm not sure how many people, other than us people who love it, live and breathe politics, watch this debate, right? We're a few days before Christmas. I literally got several phone calls, and I said, why are you calling me? I'm watching the debate. People said to me who know that I love politics, what debate? I mean, so honestly, I'm concerned about how many people actually saw this. I'm glad. And I'm also glad that I thought there were some tough questions from the moderators, which we haven't seen. But I think Amy Klobuchar is going to see a fundraising bump. I think that
she's going to get media love too.
Look, the CNN panel right now is so happy.
Absolutely, she's going to have media bump, and she's going to put that press release out maybe before the morning about the $1 million.
That's right.
But also, I think that Bernie Sanders, I just have to say, and Crystal doesn't think I give Bernie enough love on this show, but I do.
think you're fair.
I do think, but I do think that since Bernie Sanders had a real life event, a life scare of that heart attack, there has been a different person out there, someone who's much more connectable with real people, someone who's cracking jokes, who's kind of funny, someone who actually, I'm starting to say, well, maybe I want to hang out with this guy. Before that, for years, I thought he was an angry old man, and now he's someone different that I think voters may be looking at twice.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to say winner and loser. I do have to say Biden and Bernie, I'm going to say, are probably the winners, because I think the race further from here separates into a two-person race with those two guys at the top. And the reason I say that is because I think the biggest loser of the night was Pete, not only because he was exposed by Amy, he was exposed by Bernie, he was mocked by Andrew Yang also, but also because you do have Amy Klobuchar, who I think is going to come up in the polls some, especially in Iowa. She has a built-out ground game there, and that will eat into his support, again, which kind of further pushes this into this two-person race at the top. So that's what I think is going to happen from here.
And, from my perspective, we promised to be honest with everybody here. Joe Biden, for his campaign, it was a phenomenal night. He spoke fifth. He only had 15 minutes of time. He didn't have a single bad gaffe. Yeah, it's very good. It's like such a paradox that he speaks less and he does well. But he spoke he spoke very little. He had no major gaffes. In all of his moments, he seemed forceful. He completed most of his sentences. None of his teeth fell out. I mean, all of these are good things.
Low bar.
And Ellis, this is the low bar, but this is what does it for the man. So he had a very good night from his perspective. And then Mayor Pete, I agree. He was the big loser out of tonight's debate. I think we're going to see not necessarily dips in finance and in polling immediately, but the media onslaught, which created him, is really going to come down to bear. And I said this during the debate, but Mayor Pete asked that we all take him seriously, and we started to. And I think that was the biggest problem that he had.
That's
going
the problem.
Yeah,
there
we go.
Panel, we love you guys. We are so grateful for you.
You guys
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Truly appreciate all that you've done with Rising this year, by the way. All right, the debate coverage fun does not end here. Of course, it never ends. Tomorrow, LTV's Jamal Simmons is going to share his conversations with the candidates in the spin room. He is out there working as we speak, as well as his debate night observations.
That's right. And the Trump campaign is even going to join us, as we're always fair on the show, as to which candidate they saw more likely to be their 2020 rival. We hope you guys enjoyed this live debate coverage. Thank you all so much for watching.
Great,
Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.